Hello, and welcome to my mini tutorial on how to master hand gestures in just 5 minutes. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Vanessa Van Edwards, and I am lead investigator at the Science of People Human Behavior Research Lab. My favorite thing to do is to help you adopt tiny communication hacks to help you improve your effectiveness. And today we're talking about the power of hand gestures. So the very first problem that we're trying to solve is I have so many hand gestures to choose from. How am I going to actually implement just a few of them? Especially if you don't use your hands a lot. Maybe you've watched my TED Talk or you've read one of my articles on the 20 best hand gestures to use and you're like, I don't even know where to begin. The very first thing I want to teach you is an idea called nonverbal practice. So just like you practice for your verbal answers in an interview or you practice your presentation in front of an audience or boardroom, you should also practice your nonverbal, especially if you're not as familiar with your body language hacks. I've spent years teaching body language, and one thing I've realized is that we have to practice body language just like we practice for a sport. In that, when you want to adopt a new move, you have to slowly implement it into your routine. So with hand gestures, if you're not used to using them a lot or you want to rein them in, make them more purposeful, the very first thing I want you to do is identify 3 target hand gestures. The easiest hand gestures I think to start with are listing. So anytime you mention a number, you show that number on your hand. That's the easiest one to start with. The second one is going big or small or big. Anytime you mention a size of any kind, use your hands to represent that size. That could be a big idea or a small idea. That could be a big car or a small car, or a big car and a small car. Anytime that you mention a size, you use your hands to represent it. And the last one that I find the easiest to start with, these are kind of the beginner hand gestures, is me and you. Me and you. So anytime you mention something that's your opinion or your story or talking about me or I, you gesture yourself. Anytime you're talking about someone else, you can say you. Remember, be careful not to point. It's usually just an open palm gesture. I find that these are the easiest because anytime you mention them, you're able to say, oh, I have a hand gesture for that. The good news is also these don't come up all the time. It's not like you're constantly saying, you're not constantly listing things or constantly doing big and small concepts. You can also, if you have your own favorite hand gestures, I would start with just 3. So instead of keeping all 20 hand gestures in mind, I would much rather you think of just 3 you want to start with. This is a nice way to warm up your brain to just slowly begin using hand gestures as opposed to having so many or too many to choose from. The next problem we're trying to solve for here with nonverbal practice is using new hand gestures all the time everywhere. Sometimes it's just too hard to constantly be on the alert for hand gestures. So what I actually want us to do is to integrate with your constants. What I mean by this is instead of trying to say, I'm going to use hand gestures in every conversation and every board meeting, on every phone call, that's a lot to take in. And what I would rather you do is say, you know what, I'm going to pick an area where I am constant. I always answer the same elevator pitch when I'm asked, what do you do? I have a commonly asked question that people ask me all the time, like, how did you get into your line of work? Or if you're in business, maybe a client question you get asked all the time. Or maybe whenever you do an introduction, you introduce yourself. Or maybe a sales script if you're using the same scripts on calls or with clients. I want you to pick one of these areas. This is your constant. And you're going to decide to use hand gestures just during that constant. The goal here is that when this comes up, maybe 2 or 3 times a week, then you're able to practice hand gestures, as opposed to practicing hand gestures all the time in every situation. So let's say, for example, you decide, you know what, I'm going to use a big to small gesture in my elevator pitch. Anytime someone asks me, what do you do? I'm going to say that I help big companies find the little small areas they can do to improve themselves. Right? It's a very, very small hand gesture. Or in your elevator pitch, you're going to list that you do 3 different things. And every time someone asks you, what do you do? You're going to answer with that 3 gesture. That way you're not constantly on the hand gesture alert, but you know that when your elevator pitch gets next brought up, you're going to bring it up. You can again do this with a commonly asked question, your introduction, or some kind of a sales script. The goal here is to give a specific area where you can use hand gestures as opposed to feeling pressured to gestures all the time. And then as you get comfortable with one area, you can add another. So after you feel like you've mastered hand gestures in your elevator pitch, pick your commonly asked question. then add your introduction, then add it to a sales script or presentation. Last problem, too much too soon. If you're like, Vanessa, this is way too much information, I can't take it all in. All I want you to do is begin to hone one gesture at a time. So the way that I recommend you doing this is film yourself on your next phone conversation. If you feel like, you know what, I need real baby steps, on a phone call, people can't see you. So it's very low pressure practice. So what I recommend doing is opening up your phone or your computer, popping on your video camera, and next time you're on a phone call, film yourself and see what hand gestures you use naturally. That way there's no pressure for someone seeing you. You don't have to worry if you flub up a hand gesture or mess it up. You can just watch yourself and say, hey, you know what? I naturally use the pointing gesture, or I naturally give a thumbs up. If you naturally use that gesture, that would be a great one to start with. So starting on the phone can be a really nice low pressure practice. I hope this little tutorial has been helpful for you. Again, we have lots of resources on hand gestures on our website and also in my TED Talk. And if you really want to level up, you can always join our next class of People School, where I teach you all the nonverbal techniques for your communication as well as the verbal techniques for your pitch. That's scienceevil.com/pschool. Our next class is opening up soon. Thanks so much for watching.